Thank you, dear Lord, for this day and for the blessings you give us. Thank you for my students, and I pray your richest blessings upon them as they struggle with the problems and the trials of this life. Lord, we're all struggling with trials right now, from COVID to trying to recuperate from that to the events that are happening in the world with Ukraine and Russia, wondering if we're going to get pulled into World War III, wondering, Lord, all of these things, and that's just keeping us at unrest. Father, you want us to have peace. You want us to have joy. And Father, that comes from serving you. And if we just put our faith and trust in you and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're there and that you're taking care of things, that will encourage us, Father, that if this world ends, we'll be with you. And really, that's all that matters. Please be with us and strengthen us. And Father, help me tonight as I try to teach this class. Continue to be with Josh and the struggles that he's having. And Father, help him and to keep the faith. Father, I pray for Godfrey, and I pray your richest blessings upon that brother as he continues to work and do what he can to try to gain the ability to preach and teach. Bless the Georgia School of Preaching. Sometimes we get discouraged, but not many are coming. But Father, at the same time, we have some great quality students. And I pray your richest blessings upon each and every one of them. Strengthen us and be with us in Jesus' name. Amen. We're picking up with the second speech of Eliphaz. And so in essence, chapter 15, verses 2 through 13, he rebukes Job for justifying himself. And all through this, you're going to see him starting to come up with possible assumptions of what he thinks Job did to deserve what he has gotten. We see in verses 14 through 16, he's going to persuade Job to humble himself before God, to feel ashamed. And then the last part of it, from verse 17 through verse 35, he's going to sit back. Here's what happens to all of the wicked. And again, he's making a lot of the same points that he made earlier, only he's going to elaborate on them a little bit more. The point is that only the wicked are the ones that are punished. And therefore, Job, you must have done something very bad for you to be in this situation. So we start off in chapter 15, verses 1 through 3. He says, Eliphaz the Temanite answered. And again, we're going through the second cycle, so keep that in mind. So what does he say? Should a wise man answer with empty knowledge and fill himself with the east wind? Should he reason with unprofitable talk or by speeches with which he can do no good? Yes, you cast off fear and restrain prayer before God, and your iniquity teaches your mouth. You choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Notice what he's starting to say here. Notice what he's emphasizing. He's asking the question, should a wise man, Job, you are a wise man, why are you answering with empty knowledge? In other words, it's vain. Everything you've said, Job, is vain. It's useless. It's not helping anything. He doesn't point out what specific speeches that Job made that is vain or useless. He's just, in essence, condemning them all. So in essence, now, in essence, what's he saying? You're not wise anymore because your sayings are proving that you're not wise. And so he emphasizes he's in essence forfeited his reputation. In chapter 8 and verse 2, Bildad and Zophar started off this way, chapter 11, verse 2 through 3. But here Eliphaz's speech is much harsher than it was at the first. Notice he says he fills himself, or the literal translation, he fills his belly with the east wind. Again, the east wind stresses the idea they were the worst winds back, especially in that culture. A lot of the winds would come from the desert. So if it was coming from the east, it was coming from the desert, it would destroy more. And a lot of times it would be in what you call a sirocco. A sirocco, from what we understand, is a dry tornado. So you would actually have sand and everything else being tossed up. And it looks like a tornado, but it's more of a sand tornado rather than what we understand and see what a tornado is and what it often does. That doesn't argue against the fact that it still causes a great deal of destruction. So as you're looking at this, he says, Job's, your words are tearing me up like a tornado. It's like a tornado. And again, it's empty. It's tearing me up, but it's still at the same time, it's empty talk. It's useless talk. So he asks, should I reason with unprofitable talk, by speeches with which he can do no good? What you're saying is not helping you any. And again, it's unprofitable and it's useless. It's idle. You're not making any sense whatsoever. So they're not doing any good for anybody, and especially to you and to those of us that are listening. Your iniquity teaches your mouth. Now notice again, you're saying things that you shouldn't say. You cast off fear, you restrain prayer. So you're not even having the respect for God that you need to have. Here's what he's doing now. He's really laying it on. You don't even have the respect for God that you need to have, and you have stopped praying. If there is no fear of God, there is no prayer life, right? So as we think about that for just a moment, he's stressing that idea. As Job was talking to God, as we looked at in the last speech that Job made, Job is not so much praying to God as much as he's just talking to God. And by talking to God, Eliphaz may feel like that Job feels like he is equal to God as a friend. So the situation, that's the reason why God is so upset with him, because now it's not only what you've done, but now you brought God down to your level and you're talking with him, and it's not getting you anywhere, Job. It's not helping you. You cease to pray. And so, Job, as you continue to go down this path of irreligion, of not being what you need to be, you're going to cause others to fall as well. And so he says this, your own mouth condemns you and not I, your own lips. And that's what he's trying to emphasize. Your iniquity, your sin teaches your mouth, is what he says. And again, that iniquity teacheth thy mouth means that Job has allowed these evil thoughts to form in his head. And now he gives utterance to them as he speaks. But again, think about how they have provoked him to the point that he's speaking out of turn, or maybe saying things that he wouldn't have said if he had not been going through a lot of these things. So when a person loses their fear of God, don't continue to pray. What are you doing? You're choosing the tongue of the crafty. Your iniquity teaches your mouth. Your own mouth, Job, is condemning you. Your own mouth. Okay? We remember a lot of times that many people accuse Jesus of speaking blasphemous words. But Jesus wasn't speaking blasphemy. He was telling the truth. You see, people a lot of times hear what they want to hear, react to what they're thinking, and make assumptions that are not true. And this was true back then. This is true today. So he says, and this kind of boils back down to, what further need do we have of any witnesses? Your own lips testify against you. So it goes on in verse 7-9. Are you the first man who was born? Were you made before the hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we don't know? What do you understand that is not in us? The gray-haired and the aged are among us, much older than your father. Are the consolations of God too small for you? He asked the question. And the word spoken gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away? What do your eyes wink at, that you turn your spirit against God and let such words go out of your mouth? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? So as you listen to this, he really lays it on him here, all through here, right? In the first few verses of chapter 12, he asks some of the same questions of his friends, right? Job says, you are the people, wisdom will die with you. I have understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? That's what he says in chapter 12. So now, in essence, Eliphaz is putting it back on Job, maybe a little bit harsher. Okay, you claim that we don't know anything. You're the one that don't know anything because of what's happening and what you're doing right now. So he just, that's what he's emphasizing. Were you the first one born? Does all of God's wisdom rest with you? No. No, you know better than that. And so the bottom line is he's taking this and turning it back on Job. Were you made before the hills? Have you heard all the counsel of God? You know, the Bible gives us the counsel of God, but it doesn't give us all the counsel of God. It doesn't tell us everything that God was thinking and doing as he's putting together the world and everything. He's not doing, he wasn't there whenever this was made. And again, this is the same taunt he threw at them earlier, Job earlier. So wisdom is the result of experience. So are you older than the earth itself to claim the wisdom that you have? Again, with friends like these, who needs enemy? So he says, he's asking the same question. Are you the only wise man here? Have you heard the counsel? Do you limit women's wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we don't know? And again, his friends are saying, we know as much as you do. So how dare you, Job? How dare you go so far as to actually say some of the things that you're saying? We're just as old as you are. In fact, he suggested the gray-haired and the aged are among us. And that kind of seems to suggest, as you're reading this, that perhaps, especially Zophar, or excuse me, Zophar was the youngest, but Eliphaz is older than Job. So how dare you say something to me who may very well be older than Job? How dare you say some of the things that you say to me and emphasize that? Now, we understand that wisdom, think about the gray-haired and the aged are among us, is because a person lives longer that much more wisdom comes to be a part of their lives. So again, we have to understand, how did they get that wisdom? Through living, right? Psalms 119 verse 100 says this, I understand more than the ancients because I kept your precepts. When a man is striving to live the way God wants him to, then he will gain more knowledge. He will gain more understanding. He will gain more wisdom. And that's, again, what should be involved there. So he says, I know people much older than your father. Are the consolations of God small with thee? In other words, we have tried to encourage you and comfort you, though and maybe sometimes when I'm reading the book, I don't see it because I've read through it and I've taught it 2 or 3 times. So I know where they're going with that. And so a lot of times I don't give them the benefit of the doubt in the fact that they're trying to comfort Job, as much as what I see is they're trying to blame him so that he will repent, so that he will confess, so that God will restore him to the place that he was before. In other words, they're wanting to fix Job's problems when they don't even know what Job's problem is. And how often do people today want to fix our problems when they don't even know what those problems are? You know, that's the thing that challenges us to make sure that we don't go beyond what we should. He then goes on and asks this question. He says, and the word spoken gently with you, that's what the New King James says. In the margin there, the word gently could mean, is the word given to you a secret thing that only you have that we don't? So in essence, he's saying, if you're claiming that, you know, has God given you some secret consolation in your heart that we don't know about, that causing you to be so stubborn to refuse to listen to our wisdom and our advice and our encouragement? Could it be that he's saying these things out of love? We don't hear the tone of the voice. We don't see the reaction of the body language. We have to assume. I'm looking
what
at.
What verse is that?
That was verse 11. Are the consolations of God too small, and the word spoken gently with you? That word gently, in my margin in the Bible there, it says it's a secret thing, and the word spoken is a secret thing. Is it a secret thing with you? That's what he's trying to say. And so he's saying, in essence, no, you know, do you have some secret consolation in your heart and life that we don't know about, that's causing you to be so stubborn and not repent of what we're talking about? And so is there some secret sin in your life, indulged in your bosom somewhere, that keeps you from doing what we're trying to encourage you to do? Do you have some secret sin that you love so much that you just can't give it up? Is that what you're doing? So this phrase, gently, the word spoken gently, could mean that the word spoken as a secret thing. Do you have some secrets that you don't know about? Or excuse me, that we don't know about, that's causing you to act the way you do? So he's asking this: why does your heart carry you away? What do your eyes wink at, that you turn your spirit against God and let such words go out of your mouth? So he's asking this question to make Job think. What has happened for you to allow your heart to be carried away from God and cause you to get to the point to where you will not confess your audacity and your presumption and confess what you've done, so as you would get out of this situation? A lot of times, as I said, we want to solve people's problems. We can't solve their problems. We work hard at doing our own, right? And the thing is that we make assumptions. He says, what do your eyes wink at? Another translation says, why are you rolling your eyes? Have you ever seen anybody roll their eyes? Like, right, like, yeah, we've all seen it. We all get what that means, don't we? Like, I'm not believing you. I just don't believe what you're saying there. So a lot of times when we see an eye roll, it suggests impatience. Did Job roll his eyes? Possibly. Because he was getting impatient with his friends. Did he roll his eyes about the idea that they are actually trying to accuse him of specific sin? Very possibly. So he's asking the question, why do your eyes wink at? Or again, why do your eyes flash, is another translation, that you turn your spirit against God and let such words go out of your mouth? Think about it this way. He not only charges him with being carried away from God, but now he's charging him of turning away from God. Not carrying away, but turning himself. Job, you're the rebel. You're the one. So I'm not going to use any gentleness anymore. I'm going to tell it like it is, buddy, because I love you and I want what's best for you. Sometimes whenever we listen to people and they say, I love you and I want what's best for you, some people do love us and they do want what's best for us. But have you ever been in a situation where somebody's told you that and immediately the defenses come up? It's kind of like, okay, what's he about to say that I'm not going to like? And I think after all that Job has been through with these other three speeches, and as he continues on through this, he's still going to continue to struggle. Job is going to continue to struggle with what he's saying. So he says this, verse 14 through 16, he tries to emphasize, Job, you need to humble yourself. You need to feel ashamed. What is man that he could be pure? So you've been saying all along, I've not done anything to deserve this, but what man is there that's pure? And again, we're reminded of Romans 3:10, Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. He who is born of a woman, that he could be righteous. In other words, can any man really claim to be righteous before God? Can any man claim to be sinless? Obviously, Job, you've sinned so grievously to deserve this punishment. So, you obviously done something wrong. So are you saying you're so pure and so righteous that you don't deserve this? And Job has been saying all along, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And that's what gets them frustrated. So he goes on and he says, if God puts no trust in his saints, again, there's another translation here, in his angels. So God doesn't trust his angels, the King James Version says. He doesn't trust any righteous man on earth. That's what he's trying to say there. If he puts no trust in the saints, and the heavens are not pure in his sight, how much less man who's abominable and filthy, who drinks iniquity like water? Job, what are you doing here? The heavens as it was, are not clean in his sight. Only God alone is perfect purity. Only God alone thinks what is perfectly pure. And he sees in all men our thoughts, our hearts, our sins, our failings, our shortcomings.
But if you say he doesn't put no trust in his angels, like they're not holy though. Like, is that possibly a reference to the other angels that maybe,
May very well
you know
be.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, may very well have.
Because I mean, his angels are holy though, right? Like he does put some sort of trust in them because he's endowed them with powers and gifts and whatever, right?
That's right. But like you also said and pointed out so aptly, is the idea that we do know that he did not spare the angels that sinned. We remember that he had talked about that in the book of I think it's First Peter, maybe Second Peter, where he punished those angels. So the bottom line is he can't, we're not like God. So if he puts no trust in it, and again, no trust in his saints, that's the reason why some people translate this angels, some people talking about their saints. He said, how much is he going to trust man? As you look in verse 15, if you don't put faith and trust in the beings around him, how much less is he going to do it with man? He's arguing from the greater to the lesser. And I think that's what he's trying to do.
Saints could, like in Revelation, the angel says, I'm your brother. He says he calls John brethren.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's saying saints, it would mean kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something to think about in that respect. So again, how, he's saying how much less man who drinks iniquity like water. Now look at what he's saying there in verse 16. He says, you know what? If he don't trust the heavens and those that are in the heavens that are pure, how much is he going to trust man who is abominable, who drinks iniquity like water? And I think as he says that last phrase, he's definitely referring to Job. You're drinking sin like you drink water. And again, that's the way it is with some men. Some men try to live a good life and try to do what's right. Some men don't care. And they just drink deeper and deeper, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper into sin. So notice in this last little part, verse 17 through 35, here again, here's this woeful state of the wicked. So listen, I will tell you, hear me. What I've seen, I will declare. What wise men have told, not hiding anything received from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no alien passed among them. The wicked man writhes with pain all his days, and the number of years is hidden from the oppressor. Dreadful sounds are in his ears, and prosperity, the destroyer, comes upon him. He does not believe that he will return from darkness, for a sword is waiting for him. He wanders about for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king ready for battle. And he stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a strong embossed shield. You got to remember, he's saying these things, but he has one person in mind. Who is it? It's Job. Job, you're the man. You're the man that I've just described. Notice again, what is a man that he should be clean? So he said this in chapter 4, verse 17 through 19. He again assented to the truth of the statement back in chapter 9, verses 2 through 3. And so again, the question is not whether or not any man is totally sinless, but whether Job has sinned so grievously to deserve this punishment. So as he's making a statement about mankind in general, that we've all sinned, that there is none righteous, no, not one, he's at the same time, what? Implying that about himself, but he also will be saying here that those that are sinful are miserable. And Job, because you are miserable right now, you're getting exactly what you deserve. Notice verse 20. I think that's a very important stab against Job. The wicked man writhes with pain all his days. And that's where Job's been. Let's not forget, as we're reading through this discussion, that Job is speaking, but also remember the painful sores all over his body. Now, again, back in chapter 1 and 2, especially chapter 2, where he's actually scraping himself. We can't even begin to imagine the fever, the pain that would be involved in that. So as this man, this comforter, says this about Job, Job would have been sitting there thinking, yeah, okay. Notice the phrase, the number of years is hidden from the oppressor. We don't know how long Job stayed in this situation. As we read through the book, we could probably read through the book in 2, maybe 3 hours if we just sit down and try to grasp it. But what Job went through was longer than 2 or 3 hours. So as he's suffering, he says, you know, I'm going to declare unto you these things. And Job, you need to understand that you fit these things. And that's the reason why we are arguing that what? You're a sinner. You're a sinner. All right. The wicked man rides in his days. Let me see, where am I at? Yeah. Got to keep up with my notes here a little bit. The wicked man travails in all of his ways. Again, the definite application to Job is enormous pain. The number of years. These people don't have a promise of a long life. Think about how some people suffer. I think a lot about this. They get a diagnosis of cancer. And the doctor says, well, we caught it quick enough. We'll give you some chemotherapy treatments and hopefully we'll get it. And then, you know, they go through all the chemotherapy and the sickness and the pain and the aching and all that they go through because of the sickness there. And then they do all the tests and they say, well, we can't find any, we can't find any ideal of cancer. And they said, well, we want you to come back in 6 months. And they come back 6 months, and lo and behold, a tumor is growing again somewhere else. So they go through it again, the pain, the agony. To get rid of the tumor, they may have surgery. They want to buy as much time as they can. They want to spend whatever money they need to be saved from that, you know. And the thing is that the bottom line is, here's a guy that's writhing in pain all of his days. So again, he could be laying the groundwork that the wicked men shall not inherit the earth. That Job, whenever he said the wicked shall inherit the earth earlier, he said, no, the wicked can't. Only God's people inherit the earth. And I think that's what he's trying to bring out there as he emphasizes that. So nobody has the promise of a long life. They lived uncomfortably. They perished miserably. And so what happens? Dreadful sounds, terrifying sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. Things are going good, and then he hears bad news. Fears of all kind beset him. You get to thinking about someone that you love passing away, and you begin to realize that I don't have the promise of tomorrow. And those fears, well, am I going to die? How am I going to die? Will I die in an automobile accident? Will I die of cancer? Will I die of lung problems? Will I die of COVID? Will I die of, and we give the whole long list. There's always the devil kind of talking in our ears saying, yeah, you could die from any of those things. The bottom line is that we're all going to die. And so there's this sound of terror, people talking about it. You know, that's what we hear a lot of times in the church. Well, did you know so-and-so died? Sunday morning, as I was talking with people, one person came up to me, did you know so-and-so died? I said, no, I didn't know nothing about that. Now, this particular lady was in her 80s, maybe even close to 90. So, you know, we kind of sit back and think to ourselves, okay, well, she's 80, 90 years old. She's old enough to die, right? We think that, right? But the thing is that anytime we hear of a death, it reminds us all of our own mortality. And I think that's what he's trying to emphasize to him. Dreadful sounds in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. Everything's going good, but all of a sudden he's hearing about all these deaths. And then he does not believe that he will return from darkness. The idea that, you know, the wicked man has no hope of recovering his prosperity after it's been avenged. And so he feels God's judgment for his sin. So he doesn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And Job, is that where you are? You don't see any light? You know, if you just repent, everything would be better. You would see some light. You would see some hope. You would grab onto that hope. Job, you're not seeing it because you're not willing to confess it. He wanders about for bread saying, where is it? He knows that a dark day of darkness is ready at his hand. Death is close. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king prepared for battle. And he stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty. Now, again, what's he doing? He's accusing Job of doing just this. Job, this is what you're doing, buddy. You are acting defiantly against God. You're running strong. You're running stubbornly against him with his strong and boss shield. So we've been telling you to repent. You've been saying you don't have anything to repent of. So all you're doing is just running against God like that. God has this shield. He's not hurting him. You're just doing it to yourself. You're just doing it to yourself. And so that day of darkness is coming. In fact, it may have already been in. Now, it could be. We don't know how Job felt. But there were probably days when, well, as we even begin to read the text a little bit closer in Job 2, you know, that kind of pain, you can't sleep. You can't get any rest for your body. If he gets any rest, it'd be a short nap somewhere. But it's not going to be enough for this body to get enough rest to fight off the infection. And so I think what's happening here is that, you know, Job, you're a sinner. And so it all boils down to another reference that some people do suggest is the idea that the destroyer comes upon him in verse 21. Could be the day of judgment. So death, the day of judgment, it all happens at that moment in time. So what is he emphasizing here? He does not believe he will return from darkness. So the idea is, if this is talking about the second coming, then there's no resurrection, and all I will face is what I have to face then. A sword is waiting for me. You know, there's so many misfortunes here. And so he says he knows that the day of the darkness is ready at his hand. He wanders about for bread saying, where is it? He doesn't even have bread to eat. Strength to maybe eat it. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. The guilt, whenever he's sinned, often forces a person to confess what they did wrong. And again, listen, Job, is because you haven't confessed that God is coming out at you like a general with his army, so that you will be punished. He stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty, running against him with a strong, embossed shield. So we go on to verse 26. And he emphasizes the idea, he runs upon him, even upon the neck. Hey, buddy, glad to have you back. Missed you there for a second. I understand. Okay. He says, though he was covered with his face with fatness and made his waist heavy with fat, he dwells in desolate cities, in houses which have no one inhabits, which are destined to become ruined. He will not be rich, nor will his wealth continue, nor will his possessions overspread the earth. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will draw at his branches, and the breath above his mouth he will go away. Let him not trust in futile things, deceiving himself, for futility will be his reward. It will be accomplished before his time, and his branch will not be green. He will shake off his unripe grape like a vine, and cast off his blossom like an olive tree. For the company of hypocrites will be barren. Fire will consume the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and bring forth futility, and their womb prepares deceit. So what's he saying here in these few verses? Though you have been blessed, You have been blessed very well. What are happening? All this is destined to become ruins. Notice some things. His wealth will not continue. The flames will dry out his branches. That could possibly have reference to his family's destruction. And again, you see the phrase there, by the breath of his mouth, he will go away. That's kind of what happened with his family, right? I mean, boom, they were all gone, and it just that quickly. And so he says, don't trust in this vanity. Don't trust in futile things, for utility will be your reward. His branch will not be green. You will not have any other children. The story of Job ends with him having 10 more children. I often think about the fact that the other children that he has at the end of the story does not make up for the 10 that he lost at the beginning of the story. So he's just emphasizing to him, this is all that's going to happen to you. You shall shake off his unripe vine, a grape as the vine, cast off his flower as the olive. You know, sometimes during droughts or blight, the grapes drop off one by one. And the ideal again is the ideal of death. The company of hypocrites will be barren. And so, you know, they shall be desolate. No one is going to escape the punishment that Eliphaz is talking about. And again, the fire will consume the tents of bribery. Did Eliphaz accuse Job of getting money the false way, bribery? Possibly. But again, it's it. So everything that we're talking about here, he says, the womb prepares deceits. He says that's what's happening here. So we jump on into chapter 16. And again, Job speaks again. This is the second speech. All right. He really gave a long reply in chapter 15. And now again, Job gives him an answer. So what does he say? I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. You know, that's it. You telling me all these things. I've heard these things before. Eliphaz, what you just said was what you said earlier. And that's what Bildad said. And that's what Zophar said. I have heard the same things over and over and over again. You're not saying nothing new. You're not helping me in my problems. You're not helping me in these whole situations. And so you're not comforting me, but what are you doing? You're just irritating me. You just keep on irritating me. And that even annoys me that much more. He's already heard about the universal sinfulness of man. He already knows that God punishes evildoer. He heard all about it in the first speeches. So what does he say? Miserable comforters. You're not comforting me. You're hurting me. You're hurting me. You're causing me more distress. I'm miserable, and you do nothing but trouble me. So shall words of wind, that's the New King James Version. Another translation said, empty words have an end. You're not saying anything. They're empty. They're worthless. You don't think things out. You've made these things. You've made these assumptions. This is what you're trying to come back on over and over again. And you're doing nothing now but irritating. The best thing you could do is shut up. Right? I mean, if he was, you know, that's it. And again, he's asking, he says, what provokes you that you should answer? By what right are you telling me this? I didn't say anything. What have I said that irritates you? Nothing. Nothing. He begged them to be silent in chapter 13, verse 5 and 13. And now wonders what he said to them to make him attack him again in such a fashion, in this severe way. What provokes you that you should answer? I could do what you do. I could come and talk to somebody and tell them everything that I think that's wrong with their lives, but that's not bringing comfort. If your soul were in my soul's place, I could heap up words against you. I could do the same thing. It's easy. I could string together proverbs like you do. If I were in your place, I could do the same thing. But they're not comforting me. They're not helping me. You're just accusing me. He said, I could shake my head at you. I could just, contempt. He could have been like we see a lot of times. He could have been as contemptful as they were. A lot of times the shaking of the head does suggest that idea of contempt. Jeremiah 18:16 and Lamentations 2:15, Zephaniah 2:15, Psalms 22 at verse 7, and Isaiah 37 verse 22. We remember that at the cross that Jesus was dying, and those who killed him shook the head at him. Shaking the head, and that doesn't take a lot of talent, doesn't it? And again, sometimes maybe you've talked to somebody and then as you've walked off, you maybe turn around and they're just sitting back shaking their head like, no, if this guy ain't got it figured out. I've had people do it to me. I watched them. They've shook their head at me like I've lost my mind. So again, he says, I wouldn't do all that. Verse 5, but I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief. Now, in times past, and whenever we get to Job talking about this to God, he's going to talk about all the things that he did. In chapter 29 and following, he's going to talk a lot about what he did and how he had blessed those that were in need. And so he's emphasizing the idea, I would comfort you, I would bless you, I would be with you. Great lesson here. God expects us to encourage, not discourage. And a lot of times today, sadly, the church is the most discouraging place in the world. I hate to say that, but I'm being honest. Church should be a place where we come together to be encouraged. The world beats me up enough. I don't need the world beating me up and then go to church and get beat up some more. I don't need people coming up to me and fussing at me about some sins in my life that they don't even know that I'm doing, or if I am doing anything, just like his three friends were. How many times do we as church people maybe make those kind of assumptions? We practice the greatest deception in the world when we deceive ourselves. Job is saying, I could easily tell you what to do. I could easily tell you what to say. And he says, you know what? Though I speak, my grief is not relieved. He said, I could be there and be silent. You remember before all these speeches started, he sat there for 7 days and didn't say a word. And his friends were there. And they waited for him to speak. And that might have been the best 7 days that he had before all this other stuff started, right? And so he says, what happens though I speak, my grief is not relieved. If I remain silent, how am I eased? But now he has worn me out. Job is weary of life. He's weary of his comforters. He's weary of speaking. He's weary of forbearing. And he's saying what? He says, he has worn me out. He who is, if you look at that in your Bible, that word he is capitalized. Again, that was added by the translators because they think in this passage beginning in verse 6 that he's talking about God's dealings with him. So he says, you know what? He has worn me out, and you have made desolate all my company. Notice again, this phrase is, you have shriveled me up. So what is he doing? He's making these accusations against God in verses 7 through 14. Listen to what he says. Let's kind of get it all together. He says, you've worn me out. You've made desolate all my company. You have shriveled me up. It is a witness against me. My leanness rises up against me and bear witness to my face. He tears me in his wrath and hates me. He gnashes at me with his teeth. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. And he says, they gape on me with their mouth. They strike reproachfully on the cheek. They gather together against me. This is one of those passages that a lot of times some people will reference back to, but everything he says in verse 10 really applies to Jesus too, doesn't it? They gape at me with their mouth, strike me reproachfully on the cheek. God has delivered me to the ungodly and turned me over to the hand of the wicked. Well, now think about it for a moment. All the things that happened, yes, he allowed Satan to do that, but his three friends that should have been encouraging him, they are on the devil's side too, because they're not encouraging. I was at ease, but he shattered me. He's taken me by my neck and shaken me to pieces. He set me up for his target. His archers surround me. He pierces my heart and does not pity. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with wound upon wound. He runs at me like a warrior. All of these things he's saying, this is what God has done to me. This is what God has this is what's happening. He's ruined my family. Okay, he's worn me out. He's made desolate all my company. He shriveled me up, filled me with wrinkles. And again, it seems to suggest the idea that before this, he may have been, I don't say that he was fat, but he was healthy looking. But now with the disease, he's lost weight. So now what did he have? Wrinkles, right? Because the weight is coming off of him, the skin is sagging, there's wrinkles all over his body. And so there's that all involved there. I'm bound by my wrinkles, my leanness. When I look at it, I'm bore up with the face. Sickness caused his flesh to melt away. And what? He was used by his friends to prove he was a sinner. If he was in good shape, he would be fair-fleshed. He tears me in his wrath. Some take this to refer to Satan, as I mentioned earlier. Others think it might be referencing Eliphaz and the three friends, or the other two friends. Some see this as referring to God. But again, we remember that Job says that God cares for all his creation. Job 14, verse 15. So Job feels that God has treated him as if he's hated Job. He gnashed on me with his teeth like a wild animal. Mine eyes, or he says that my eyes are sharpened, verse 9. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. They've gaped on me with their mouth. They've spitten upon me. And again, Job was a type of Christ. We remember Micah chapter 5, verse 1, Matthew 27:30, Luke 22:34, John 18:22. That's the reason why I record these, so you can go back and listen to them again later, okay? And he says, they gathered themselves against me. And so what does he say? God has delivered me to the ungodly. In all of this, he's blamed God for it. God's delivered me this way. Just like Christ, he felt like God delivered him to the ungodly. When we get in the heat of an argument, when we're hurting physically, when it seems like there's nobody that we can turn to spiritually, then we lash out at everybody. We wind up saying things we don't mean. Would God ever really deliver people to the ungodly? Well, yeah, if they needed punishment. So this would be another argument that would argue the fact, according to them, that Job deserved what he got. So he said, I was at ease, but he broke me asunder. He was in the state of happiness and comfort. Go back and read 1:1-5. And again, he didn't have a care in this world, but he broke me asunder. Life ruined me. And what he did, he took me by the neck and shook me to pieces. He set me up for his target. It's like, Job didn't come out and shoot it, or God didn't come out and shoot at Job himself, but he let all the archers do it. We understand that in other times, God allows other people to use people to punish other people. He cleaves his rein after he pierced my heart. He pierced my heart. And he pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with wound upon wound and runs at me like a warrior. He just keeps on. It's kind of like besieging a town at that time. They break a wall, and there would be more men to attack that break in the wall to get through it over and over and over again. And that's what he was trying to do. So he says, what? Verse 15, I have sewn sackcloth over my skin. Sackcloth is what everybody would wear if you're in trials and difficulties. So he says, in essence, think about this. If it was some sort of a disease where he's oozing, so if he put some of that sackcloth on his disease or on the ooze, maybe just to keep from having to wipe it off and all the time, it would get into the sackcloth. And then if he allowed it to dry, what would happen? It would just pull off again, and he'd start oozing and bleeding again. So he had put on this sackcloth, mourning and grief. And he says, he's laid my head in the dust. You know what? My honor, my dignity, my head would be the idea of the horns, as it was. You know, we think about animals that have horns. He laid my head in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping. He cries, losing his family, losing his health. You know, as I read through the Bible, we read a lot of occasions where people are weeping. And one of the things the Bible does really clear to say to us is the fact that there are going to be things that's going to cause us to cry, to weep, to mourn. But we have in our culture, we always, you know, we hug somebody and say, don't cry. God gives us crying for a reason. He gives us weeping for a reason. And again, rather than telling people not to cry, we maybe need to be telling people to cry to give them some relief as they go through the things that they have to go through. So my face is flushed from weeping. My eye on my eyelids is the shadow of death. Although no violence is in my hand and my prayer is pure. So here again, I'm not being hypocritical. I'm praying to God. My prayers have been sincere and genuine. Eliphaz, back in chapter 15, charged him with his prayers not being sincere and genuine. I've not done anything wrong. I have not committed robbery. Again, Eliphaz in chapter 15, verse 28 and 34, said that he had done that. So he said, earth, do not cover my blood. Let my cry have no resting place. Surely now my witness is in heaven and my evidence is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God. As a man pleads with his neighbors, when a few years are finished, I shall go the way of no return. So let's look at what he's trying to say in these last few verses, and then we'll take a couple of minute break. All right. Let me wet my whistle a little bit more. Again, he wants to take God as it was to contest. He says, I want to plead with God, verse 21, so that I can contend. And he says, when the few years come, then I shall go the way that I shall not return. The ideal is I'm going to eventually die. And it may very well be, as he's getting sicker and sicker from this stuff, he feels like he's going to that point. And so, you know, he wants to die with no blame. He wants to go to the grave with an untarnished name. He wants to be what God wants him to be. All right. Let's stop there for a minute. Like I said, let me get something to drink and we'll pick up with chapter 17. Okay. Going a little fast. Okay. Ready to start again? Okay. We pick up now with Job chapter 17, verses 1 and 2. This chapter is going to be a little bit harder to divide because it seems like Job is jumping around from one part to the other. So just kind of bear with us as we go through it together. He jumps around. Again, think about a man in pain. Think about his hurt. Think about his spirit and what's going on there. So he says, my spirit is broken. And he says, my days are extinguished. The grave is ready for me, and are not mockers with me? Does not my eye dwell on their provocation? So again, he's saying, my days are extinct, and what's happening, the grave is ready for me. Now, back in chapter 16, verse 22, he says, when a few years are finished, I shall go the way of no return. So chapter 16, verse 22 may go along with chapter 17 at verse 1, where he's emphasizing the idea that he thinks of an imminent death. His breath is corrupt. His vital powers are near extinction. He's about to die. A lot of people feel like that the bad breath is something that brings, a sign of imminent doom. So he said, my days are extinct. They cut off, and the grave is ready for me. So that's it. And so he's continuing to wanting to be justified before his death, which seems to be imminent. The grave is ready for me. So they're not mockers with me? And he says, the thing that if I'm about to die, what I'm getting right now, what's really happening right now is not what needs to happen, but my friends are mocking me as I'm about to die. The one thing we want whenever we die is peace. And Job feels like he's not getting that. He's nothing else to look upon. These mockers are always provoking him. And so he says, verse 3, put down a pledge for me with yourself. He's talking to God now. Who is he who will shake hands with me? You have hidden their heart from understanding. Therefore, you will not exalt them. He who speaks flattery to his friends, even the eyes of his children will fall. So he's saying here to God, again, he's calling God, put down a pledge for me. Again, it's the idea of putting down money for me or something along that line, calling God to court, deposit the money so the court will require that the case be heard, put me in surety of it. So that's what he wants to be sure of, so that he could ratify a contract, that he would shake hands with me. Who is he that shake hands? A lot of times whenever we make an agreement with somebody, we shake hands. So that's the idea that he's trying to bring out here. God, I want you to do that. You have hidden their heart from understanding. You have, in essence, you have caused them, Lord, the hearts of the friends, their hearts are blind. And, think about the idea that God, a lot of times in scripture, blinds the heart. Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, and 2 Thessalonians 2:11, that God will sometimes blind a person's heart or his mind, so forth, by the preaching of the truth, because they don't want to hear it. God also grants wisdom through the truth. So as we're saying this, these men did not have it. And he says, because his friends were this way, I want to take my taste to God. They're not listening to what I've got to say now. I want to take my case to God. You have hidden their heart from understanding. You have not exalted them. And he said, he speaks flattery to his friends. Even the eyes of his children shall fail. Job is accusing his comforters of bringing him up to calamity, announcing his misfortune upon robbers. And again, because they think he's guilty of some secret sin. He's made me a byword of the people. I have become one in whose face men spit. My eye has grown dim because of sorrow. All my members are like shadows. Upright men are astonished at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite. The righteous will hold to his way, and he who has clean hands will be stronger and stronger. So in essence, God, by sending these afflictions on Job, has made Job the byword of the people, the laughing stock, the talk of the country, the gazing stock. You're now not as rich as Job, but now you're as poor as Job. You have nothing. And God made Job at that time, God's patient under affliction, made him a byword today. So think about today, if you use the word Job to Christian people. Now, a lot of people won't know it because they don't know Job. But if you talk to Christian people, most Christian people should think about the story of Job and the story of his suffering. So that's how he's become a byword. He says in verse 6, and I've become one in whose face men spit. Again, they look at him as all were pleased with him, but I've become an abomination before them. I'm despised and rejected because of what I'm going through. My eyes are dim because I've wept so long and hard that it's afflicted my sight. Chapter 16:16, my face is flushed from weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. We've all seen people who've cried a lot. Black circles around their eyes, red, teary eyes. We see what's going on. He can't see as he once did. And again, they did not see anything wrong with crying and weeping, but think about again the idea of what was going on. My members are like shadows due to the disease. He's not eating well. He's the shadow of a man instead of the man himself. I see a man literally skin and bones wasting away. And that's how he looks at it. And I'm trying to really emphasize this to all of us so that we could really grasp the idea of what he's going through and how it's hurting him. He said, the upright men are astonished at this. Men who at one time, well, let's put it this way, Job, who is righteous and trusting God, a lot of times may look at those that are sick and hurting and in pain and wonder what God or what they've done to cause God to punish them this way. The righteous men will be astonished that one like Job is suffering this way. And even more astonished that even after his prayers, God has not answered. God has not answered Job. He's continuing to suffer. And so what does he say? The innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite. After the astonishment will come indignation. The righteous will be encouraged more to faithfulness. So again, there's a need for righteous people to stand for against sin and hypocrisy. We often use the old saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do what? To do nothing, right? So we need to be the ones standing for the truth. The righteous will hold to his way, and he who has clean hands will be stronger and stronger. So Job is saying, I'm going through this, but I'm holding to my way. I'm claiming that I'm going to become stronger and stronger. He's discussing what the righteous will do. And so he says, those who truly trust in God, then, their trust in God will be what it needs to be. But some, when they're suffering, falter and fail, never to rise again. And I think about how many members of the church have left for various reasons. It's because maybe they put more faith in men than they have God. And maybe they put more faith in what they thought God ought to do rather than what God did do. He that hath clean hands, he says, will be stronger and stronger. And so he's saying, God, this is the way I am. You've made me a byword. And he says, upright men are astonished, the innocent himself, and yet the righteous will hold to his ways. What's he saying? God, I'm still righteous. I know it. I've not done anything wrong to deserve this. Please come back again, all of you. For I shall not find one wise man among you. Again, he's addressing his friends here in verse 10. And he's saying, I'm challenged. Go ahead and try to justify your case. I will listen. See if I can find any evidence of wisdom in your words at all, but I can't find one wise man among you. I cannot find one wise man among you. You make these assumptions. And again, they're not true. Renew the debate. Give me the best you've got, because I know that what you're saying is not true. And so he'll say in verse 11, my days are past, my purposes are broken off. Even the thoughts of my heart, they change the night into day. The light is near, they say. If I wait for the grave as my house, if I make my bed in the darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, you are my mother and my sister, where's my hope? As for my hope, who can see it? Will they go to the gates of Sheol? Shall we have rest together in the dust? So again, he says, he addressed his friends in verse 10, then he goes back to his way he was. My days are past. I'm giving up. He's not long here on the earth. His purposes are broken off. All my plans have failed. And, he feels like he's in a hopeless position. No matter what happens, he is not going to be able to do much because of death coming on. I think about the fact sometimes as I read passages like this that I need to consider in my own life the reality of the fact that I don't know when my last days will be. So I need to live as if every day is going to be my last day. I think he said they changed the night today. I think the word they is referring to the friends. With their high words of hope, they try to change the night today. They're trying to bring hope to a hopeless situation. And again, read chapter 5, verse 18 through 26, and 8, chapter 21 through 22. The light is short because of darkness. There's always the dark, we always say there's always the darkest before what? Before the dawn. And so Job had not found comfort in these assurances. He probably felt like it would take a miracle himself for all this to happen. And he says, you know what? The grave is my house. I've made my bed in darkness. I'm looking forward to, I have no hope of returning to prosperity, no hope of dignity, no hope of honor. I'm going to make myself in the grave. And I'll say to corruption, as my body rots in the grave, you are my father. And you're my family now. To the worm, he will say, you are my mother and my sister. But again, he's saying the same thing in that parallelism as we talk about. And where is his hope? He now says, what hope do I have in this life? I have no hope. I have no hope. Job given up on it. And so he says at last, we go down to the pit. We're going to go down to the grave. And the bottom line is, this isn't going to be broken until the general resurrection from the dead. At least, as he's coming to the end of this chapter, he's saying, I'm at least getting some what? I'm going to get a little bit of rest after I die, because I'm not going to get it here. And that's where he starts. All right. Now, I want you to notice we've already covered the speech of Eliphaz, and we've covered now Job's speech. Now, again, who's going to be the next one on the bat? It's going to be Bildad. But I also want you to notice as you look at this, these speeches get shorter. Now, earlier they were longer because they had more points. Now, a lot of these speeches get shorter and shorter and shorter by Job's friends. In Bildad's first discourse, he in essence assaulted Job and said, it's all your fault. So he gave him some encouragement. But in this speech, we're going to see no hope whatsoever. In essence, Job, you're not going to be able to do anything. And so he's going to reprove Job as haughty and passionate. And he's going to, again, talk about, like his other friends have, as we've seen up to this point in time, you're wicked. This is the reason why you're doing this. And this is the proof. So Bildad says this, verse 2. He says, how long will you put an end to words? Gain understanding, and afterward we will speak. Why are we counted as beasts and regarded as stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself in anger, shall the earth be forsaken for you? Shall the rock be removed from its place? So again, he says, how long is it going to be before you be quiet? All right. And Job is going to say, what? Well, you're breaking me in pieces with your words too. All right, let's take a quick break. We got some other folks wanting to come in and take a break. So I'll give you another break here, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so we're back at chapter 18, right? In Bildad's first discourse, he assaulted Job, but he left him some encouragement. Now again, we have Bildad again. He sharply reproves Job as haughty and passionate, stubborn as in his opinions, verses 1 through 4. But then he talks about the misery of the wicked people. So let's see what he says, verses 1 through 4. How long till you put an end in words? Gain understanding, and afterward we will speak. Why are we counted as beasts and regarded as stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself in anger, shall the earth be forsaken for you? Shall the rock be removed from its place? Boy, he just really comes down hard on Job there, doesn't he? He just lays it out there. And so he says, you know, how long will it be before you? I think there's an impatience in Bildad's words. He has said some things. His friends have said some things. He turns it, and so he's saying in here, he's using the second person plural. And again, the ideal is he's talking about all of his friends. So he says, how long till you put an end to this? Gain understanding, and we will speak. If you think a little bit and you stop accusing us of everything, then we will try to give you some understanding to help you get out of the situation that you're in. Why are we counted as beasts? Okay, now chapter 12, verse 7, Job, you know, mentioned the fact that even beasts could tell some things about God, right? But the main meaning is why are you treating us in your remarks as if we have no sense? As if we are not making good arguments ourselves. You've not treated our arguments with the attention they deserve. You count them as unworthy. You're not answering our arguments. But yes, Job is. They're not listening. He says, why is it that we're counted as beasts and regarded as stupid? The King James Version translates it's reviled in your sight. You know, it's the idea he told in chapter 16, verse 11, miserable comforters, all your all. Boy, that stung a little bit, but it was the reality. At least they were there. At least they were there. In chapter 17, verse 10, he said they were without wisdom. Chapter 17, verse 4, he stated they were without wisdom. You know, but he never called them unclean. He never called them sinners of the deepest heart. He never called them stupid. Okay. And so he says, you who tear yourself in anger, again, speaking of Job, again, you're the one, Job, that's tearing yourself in anger against God. Chapter 16, verse 9, Job said that God had torn him. But here, again, Job had torn himself by some sin that he refuses to confess. You've done it. Should the earth be forsaken by you? Shall the rock be removed from its place? Do you think the whole course of the world will change just to make exception to you, Job? Shall God's laws of punishment to evildoers be changed just because you claim to be righteous? God cannot. He cannot forsake the earth. And so for Job had wished for all kinds of impossible things earlier, chapter 9, verse 32 through 35, chapter 13, 21 and 22, chapter 16, verse 21. But again, he's not seeing how impassioned Job is. And so he says, shall the rock be removed from its place? In other words, Job, you've not shown yourself to be submissive to the divine will. You need to humble yourself. Many proud and arrogant men feel that way. Their sin's special. They shouldn't be treated like common sinners, right? And that's how Bildad feels about Job. You think you're special, and you don't think you should be treated like everybody else that sins. But the reality is you should. Now, beginning in verse 5 and going through verse 21, he talks again about the misery of the wicked people. Let's go and read through, well, this whole section's part of it. Let's read through the whole thing. The light of the wicked indeed goes out. The flame of his fire does not shine. The light is dark in his tent. His lamp beside him is put out. The steps of his strength are shortened. His own counsel casts him down. He's cast into a net by his own feet. He walks into a snare. The net takes him by the heel and the snare lays hold of him. A noose is hidden for him on the ground and a trap for him in the road. Terrors fighting him on every side and drive him to his feet. His strength is starved. Destruction is ready at his side. It devours patches of his skin. The firstborn of death devours his limbs. He's uprooted from the shelter of his tent, and they parade him before the king of terrors. They dwell in his tent who are none of his. Brimstone is scattered on his dwelling. His roots are dried out below, and his branches wither above. The memory of him perishes from the earth, and no name. He has no name among the renowned. He's driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. He has neither son nor posterity among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. Those in the west are astonished at his day, and those in the east are frightened. Such are the dwellings of the wicked, and this is the place of him who does not know God. All right, now, hopefully, as you read this, you've probably seen some of the accusations that he's making here. Notice the light of the wicked shall be put out. Again, the wicked man shall be cut off from all light. What I think he's beginning to do here and carries on throughout the verse is string together a bunch of proverbs that describe the destiny of the wicked man. All righty. One thing you've got to say about Bildad and Zophar and so forth is they're committed men. They're men that are men of conviction. Even though Job doesn't heed their advice, it just strengthens their conviction about what is right, and it strengthens their conviction that they believe that Job has sinned in some way that caused him to be in this situation. And that's what made this so hard. So, while it may appear to be true, while it may appear to be true in the fact that we think wicked men should be punished in this way, we have to realize that there are some who wicked that do not suffer, and there are many righteous people who do suffer. And Job was one of those righteous people who suffered. So what does he say? The light of the wicked indeed goes out. In other words, it seems to be whatever prosperity the wicked man has, all of it's going to be taken away from him. Did that happen to Job? Yeah. I think that's exactly the point he was trying to make there. The spark of the fire, the flame of his fire does not shine. What does that suggest? Again, the custom in Arabia and the East of having fires outside the tents to invite strangers, which expressed hospitality. So the idea here is the wicked man is so stricken that he can't invite anybody to eat and drink with him. And up to that point in time, probably he's not. When a man is sick the way Job is, he doesn't want to eat. And Bildad and Zophar and I can't remember, for some reason or another, I'm not remembering the last one's name. Have they eaten through all of this? I don't know. Huh? They must have somewhere, but I don't know where, don't know how. Okay. Notice he says the flame does not shine, the light is dark in his tent. Again, you hear this parallelism. He's saying the same thing over and over and over again. So the ideal is the candle, his lamp is put out, the light is dark. So a lot of times in Egypt and Arabia, there's a custom of having a lamp burning all night long so that people can see things. And what you're seeing, Job, is nothing because your lamp is put out. He then starts talking about verse 7 and 8. The steps of his strength are shortened, and his own counsel cast him down, for he's cast into a net by his own feet. He walks into a snare. Here he's talking about the idea that here's a man that's tripped up and hurt himself because, why? Because of the fact that he has been caught in a trap because of his wickedness. He's cast into a net by his own feet. So he can't do what he once did. Snares laden, a noose is hidden for him on the ground. I think about the idea that he walks into a net and he has no one to blame but himself. A lot of times people make traps for other people and they wind up being entrapped themselves, do they not? And that's what he's saying here. You've done this. So while you're telling us about all of the things that you've not done, you're walking upon a snare, a pitfall. You're captured like the wild beasts because of your sin. And again, you walked in this trap and you have nobody to blame but yourself. That's the point he's trying to make. The net takes him by the heel and the snare lays hold of him. A noose is hidden on the ground. A lot of times when I think about that idea, I think about these traps that supposedly the old people made to trap animals, something like that, putting a little noose on the ground and have it triggered in such a way where they set something off, they get hung up and then they go and kill their meal, right? Something that straps upon an animal. Think about a rat trap, mouse trap. It's there with a cheese, snap, boom, it's over. The mouse is dead. And that's what is in essence happening to you. Again, you've been heaping image upon image about the wicked man being snared and trapped in so many ways. He's sure to be punished, is what he's saying. You're being punished, therefore you are wicked. There's the conclusion. So there's a man is walking down the road and he knows that he's sinful. Terrors are attacking or making him afraid on every side. There's always somebody out to get him. And as Job has gone through all the things he's gone through, he lost his family, lost his wealth, and then lost his health. What more is there for him to go through? What more is there for him to struggle with? And again, maybe this pointed barb here is saying, his strength is starved. What does that mean? This wicked or this boils or whatever it was, this elephantiasis, as I've talked about before, this has been so bad on him that what? Destruction, his strength is starved. He doesn't have anything left to fight with. He's fought this all that he can. So think about this disease eating into his muscles, the bones, the skin, and the firstborn of death, he says, devours his limbs. Could it be that he was looking at Job at that moment in time, seeing how he wasted away and how really, as he continued to look at that whole situation, what did he see? Job's not going to be with us that much longer. And so thinking about it from that way, to the Near Eastern thought at that time was that disease often led to death, and they knew that. So they a lot of times would say that the disease are often considered to be the children of death. Verse 14, he's uprooted from the shelter of his tent. They parade before him like king of terrors. They dwell in his tent who are none of his. Brimstone is scattered on his dwelling. So it's kind of like his tent's gone. Brimstone is that shaking. And so it brings him to the king of terrors. The wicked man shall be brought to him who is terrible. He's going to have to give an account. This judge is going to count him to be worthy of death. A monarch who infuses terror into the soul of the people that he dwells or he rules over. He says, what? Going back a little further in verse 15, he says, brimstone is scattered on his dwelling. Those who dwell in his tent are none of his. Okay. All of these terrors, all of these bad things he was going through now makes his dwelling place uninhabitable. And brimstone shall be put it. Brimstone was something like sulfur, and a lot of times would come out when the volcano would throw out. All right. So it'd make everything around it desolate. Verse 16, his roots are dried out below, his branch withers above. The memory of him perishes from the earth, and he has no name among all the renowned. So he dies. That's it. He dies. He's there's no hope at all. He's cut off. Nothing whatever, no chance. And his remembrance perishes from the earth. Nobody remembers him. Now, of course, we're reading about Job, so we remember him and we see what's going on here. But think about how often, a lot of people want to be remembered after they're gone, right? Carve names on tombstones. A lot of times, depending on this tombstones, you see additions. When I worked at a funeral home, and I worked for one for about 6 or 7 years, a lot of times whenever I went to a cemetery, I would look at the grave markers. When I had an opportunity to do so, I'd look at the grave markers and see babies, see older men, younger men, teenagers. Read the grave markers, see what they wanted to be remembered for, or why they died, or what circumstances led to their death. I've seen huge markers that stand 10 or 12 feet tall, talking about men who died in war. My father's grave in Alabama has on it gunnery sergeant, Marines, Korea and Vietnam, because he served in both conflicts. My mother's grave has on it faithful wife and mother. I read a lot of those things and I see a lot of those things, and I've appreciated the fact that a lot of times when I go to graveyards, I do that simply because I'm reminding myself that one day I'm going to be there. What will people say about me after I'm gone? Well, that's what kind of, that's kind of what he's trying to bring out here. His roots are dried out. The memory of him perishes from the earth. Think about the multiplied millions who died in Hitler's ovens. Think about the multiplied millions that have died from wars. Unnamed, forgotten, but not by God. Think about all that. And sometimes, especially to the people of those days, as Job is writing, they don't want to be forgotten. Of course, when we're dead, it doesn't matter. We don't think about it. But these people did not want to be forgotten. So he says the memory of them perishes from the earth, and he has no name among the renowned. We remember the story of Job. We remember the story of his life. We remember what his story is trying to teach us and trying to emphasize to us. So he continues on and he says, his remembrance is gone. No name in the street. Have you ever watched the movie The Christmas Carol? And
Yeah.
Scrooge is afraid at the very end, close to it, in the Scrooge's Christmas Carol, he thinks about the fact, what will he be remembered as? And his whole life changes. That's the whole theme of the story as Dickens brings it out. So the thing is here we have Bildad saying he's driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. Job, remember, think about this, is look forward to death. And when he looks forward to, Bildad is saying, is a banishment. He said it's just being banished, exile. You're there because of your sins. And again, the world and its inhabitants are a place where the wicked man would like to stay. But again, what the world wants is for them to die. He has neither son nor posterity among his people. You think there was a jab about his family here? Now you got to remember, he's lost his family except for his wife. Think about the idea, he's stringing Proverbs together. His family goods shall be cut off. And again, no son, no grandson. And he says what? Those in the west are astonished at his day. Those in the east are frightened. And he says, in essence, these people aren't going to remember them. They're going to be astonished at the way he died, his calamities. Men shall hear of the end of the wicked man and hope that their end is not like his.
Is the West us? Is that us in the United
Uh,
States?
we would be more probably if he was talking about this in the land of Palestine. We don't know where Job was. We we go back to Job chapter 1. We find he was in the east. Let's see. Yeah, he was in the land of Uz. We don't know where the land of Uz really was at that time. But again, for this to be a part of the Bible, the Jews must have had it. So if we look at it from that viewpoint over here in America, we would be way east than them.
Well, they always call us the West. Everywhere else, it seems like they call us the West.
Uh-huh. Well, it depends, I guess, on where you're from. If you're in China, we are west of China, aren't we? In Vietnam and
Yeah.
so forth, we are west, but it depends on where you are. If you are over in England, we are east of England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's something to take consideration. I think it will boil down to that. Okay. So there's Bildad's arguments. All right. So now we've gotten through two arguments, and actually three arguments up to this point in time. Now we're in chapter 19, Job chapter 19. And we're rocking now, aren't we? We're rocking now. We're trying to, because again, I wanted to take that few moments to do that. Job again, in Job chapter 19, he's going to make his points again. Now, chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, he's going to complain about his friends again. In chapter 5, verse through chapter 20, he's going to complain about his calamities. And he's going to say again that God is the one who's given me these calamities, and he's not saying nothing about his sin. So it seems like no matter who says what, he's not going to own up to no sin, and this is what gets them aggravated. In this passage, he's also going to blame God for a lot of what has happened. Now, we remember Job 1 and 2. I always want to kind of go back to Job 1 and 2, where there's that discussion between God and Satan. And God allows Satan to do this to Job. In a real sense, Job, the way he's looking at it is God is doing it to me. And in a sense, that's true, in that he has allowed Satan to do this to Job. But God himself doing these things to Job is not true. So I think we have to kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at this passage. And at the same time, also, when we're especially here in chapter 19, is look at the idea that even when Job is suffering this way, his faith in God never ceased. He couldn't understand why he was going through it, but he still trusted God. And to me, that's one of the most comforting and encouraging things that I think we can learn from this book. Job still trusted God. So let's look at the arguments. And as we start looking at this a little bit more, beginning in chapter 19, verses 5 through 20, Job is going to accuse him of God wronging him. Chapter 19 at verse 6. Chapter 19 at verse 7. He says, I'm crying out for justice and God refuses to hear me. I am not heard. Chapter 19, verse 8, he has fenced up my way. In other words, I can't escape. He said he has set darkness in my path, so I can't see where I'm going. He stripped me of my glory, verse 9. He's taken the crown from my head, verse 9. He breaks down everything. He destroyed God God has destroyed him on every side, verse 10. God has kindled his wrath against Job, verse 11 and verse 12, and sent troops against him to be defeated. He has removed my brothers far from me. God made him a stranger and alien to his family. Even his children, they're not there anymore. But even he will mention the idea.
Hey, Tommy,
Okay.
you break.
Huh?
You break it up real bad.
I'm sorry. There's an issue with
I said you're breaking up real bad. I don't know.
yeah, there's an issue with the internet here. And I think it may be because of the rain or something. I'm not sure. So I'm sorry.
It keeps cutting me off.
Yeah. Okay. I may have to get this last little bit because we do have some internet problems here. I'm not sure why, but we do. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm going to try a couple of more minutes. If it keeps breaking up, I'll just quit. Okay.
Now,
do what now?
Yeah, right. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
I'm going to keep trying. And if it
I
stops,
said, go ahead. That's fine.
I'll keep trying. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, God has done all good things to him. All righty. Now listen to chapter 19, verse 1-4. Job answered, said, how long will you torment my soul and break me in pieces with words? Before I go any further, that's a very important passage to me. I hear people say, sticks and stones shall break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And yet Job says, no, that's not the case. Words do hurt. I think there's a great lesson there, a huge lesson there. So he says, break me in pieces with words. These 10 times you have reproached me. You're not ashamed that you have wronged me. If indeed, he says, I have erred, my error remains with me. If indeed, he says, you exalt yourselves against me and plead my disgrace against me, know then that God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net. So again, you see a lot of passion, a lot of hurt, a lot of anger with Bildad's speech. How long will you vex my soul? Back in chapter 18, verse 2, Bildad asked the question, how long till you put an end to words? So now it's just kind of it's saying the same thing again. How long will you vex me? How long will you come up with vain, empty, idle talk? So you're breaking me in pieces. Words are like hammers a lot of times. Words are like hammers. They break our soul. They break our spirit. They break our heart. And we need to be careful whenever we're talking with people because they do just that. Verse 3, these 10 times. Now, was it actually 10 times? Well, we do know the first batch and then the second batch, we're working on that. So really, literally, it's been about 8 times, but 10 times is a Hebrew idiom suggesting the word many. So these many times you have tried to break me down. You're not ashamed, he's saying, that you've made yourselves strangers to me. You made yourselves strangers. You stunned me, hardened me, become swift. And so you're my friends, but you're not ashamed to hurt me. He says, you need to stop. He says, be it indeed that I have erred, my anger or error remains with myself. So Job at no time claims perfection and often pleads guilty to sin. Job is what he's saying here. If I have erred, it's my concern. None of you have the right to reproach me the way you have. So my error, he says, remains with myself. It's me. And so you don't really have any right to tell me how you think about it. He's willing to face the results of his own conduct. All right. Can you hear me any better now? Josh? Can you hear me?
It keeps cutting me on and off, but it's fine. Yeah, it keeps cutting me on and off, but it's fine though.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep going. It's still recording, so hopefully you can see the tail end of it if something happens between now and then, okay? We've only got about 30 more minutes anyway. So I may try to cover 19 very quickly and then go on, all right? Chapter 19, verse 5. If indeed you exalt yourselves against me and plead my disgrace against me, know then that God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net. God has overthrown me, he says in essence. God is the one who brought me into this pit, this dangerous place. You remember earlier in Bildad had talked about the idea of the traps laying for him. He's saying, God is the one who has done this. He's surrounded me. He has been the one who has surrounded me with this net. And so before you try to accuse me of hypocrisy, you need to at least pity me first. And he emphasizes the idea, look at the reproaches God has laid upon me. Plead my disgrace with him. He said, you know what? These comforters have concluded that Job is a monster of wickedness in some time or another. But he said, instead, you should have shown pity because I have not done these things. So he says, you exalt yourselves, plead my disgrace. God has wronged me and he surrounded me with his net. He wants them to know that as far as he's concerned, God is the one who has done it. And again, God has overthrown him, made him crooked, distorted, overturned him. God is the culprit, he says, not me. I'm not the one guilty. God has compassed me, ensnared me with his net. God has refused to hear me. If I cry out concerning wrong, I am not heard. If I cry aloud, there's no justice. He's fenced up my way. I cannot pass. He's darkness in my path. Stripped me of my glory, taken the crown from my head, and breaks me down on every side, and I'm gone. My hope he has uprooted like a tree. He's kindled his wrath against me, and he counts me as one of his enemies, and his troops come together and build up their road against me. They encamp, he says, all around my tent. So he can't escape. God refuses to hear him. God's not listening. His friends are not listening. God has stripped him of his glory. He said, I'm not being heard. He has fenced me up. I can't get out. And so, in essence, everything's been taken away from me. Everything's gone. The crown, the honor, the dignity of my head is no longer there. I have nothing. I have nothing. He has destroyed me. He breaks me down on every side. He has destroyed me every which way. Again, it suggests the ideal of an attack on a walled town, and there was no part of the wall that wasn't attacked in some way or another. And what has he had? Nothing. Nothing. He has nothing. My hope is removed like a tree. His hope. A lot of times the word hope does not suggest what we think of hope, but it suggests the ideal of family, long life, tranquility, domestic bliss until he naturally dies. And Job says, God has destroyed my hope as well. So he says, he counts me as an enemy. I'm plucked up by my roots. There's no chance of me growing again. He's kindled his wrath against me. I'm one of his enemies. And again, he stated this in chapter 13 at verse 24. He stated this again in chapter 16 at verse 9. And again, he says, if God has done all this to me, why are my friends doing it to me? Why are they adding insult to injury? Why am I struggling so much to deal with these things just this way whenever I should not have to be doing that? So we go on just a little bit further. We are going to finish here in just a few minutes. He says his troops come together. God has put a whole army against him, continues to launch attacks upon him. And he says, they raises me up in the way. When soldiers battled the city, they would raise mounds of dirt to attack the city walls. And again, to give access to the city. He said, they have encamped around my tabernacle. As he has encamped around my tent. Like again, the soldiers would surround the city. He's been made an alien from his brothers. He has been made an alien from his family. And again, his burden is heavier to be borne. Think about how Jesus was alienated from his family, how his brothers would try to get him to stop preaching. Think about how he too, Jesus, would suffer because of family. And again, this made this heavier a burden, the heavier to be borne. Think about again how Jesus was suffering on the cross and his mother was there. Doesn't say nothing about his brothers or sisters. His mother was there. And he was thinking about her, not himself. Thinking about the idea. He says, my friends have forsaken me in verse 13. My acquaintance has completely estranged from me. You're my friends, and you've left me. You've let me go astray. My kinfolks, my familiar friends, those who knew me well, they've forsaken me as well. And is this a jab to his friends? I think so. You too have left me. You're not encouraging me. You've left me. And so, going on a little further, those who dwell in my house, my maidservants, count me as a stranger. Before all the events happened, he probably had a lot of servants. There may still be some there, but I don't know how he's supporting them. I don't know if he's doing anything to try to help them at this time. The guards, everybody who were dependent upon him, now they're all looking at him as an alien. His servants probably thought that he had done something wrong. They ceased to respect him or treat him as the head of the family. He said, I called my servant, but he gives no answer. You know, in a day whenever slaves would hang on the words of their master because they would have to do everything the master said, whenever they couldn't hear the master's words, they no longer respected Job. He said, I entreated him. I beg him with my mouth. I beg him. And he said he won't listen. He ceased to be the master of his own house. He then goes on and he says, my wife, or my breath is offensive to my wife, and I am repulsive to the children of my own body. The idea that he brings out here is, you know, it could have had reference to the bad breath that Job had because of his sickness. She would not be around him for that reason. He begged his wife maybe to treat him as a wife should, if not for the fact that he was her husband, but for the fact they had children together. He's just begging his wife to do what a wife would do. And again, think about the idea that the wife is suffering too. Mrs. Job hurts too. So he says, young children despise me. I arise and they speak against me. Children would not treat this older man with respect and honor that was due to him. And again, it was rudeness and dishonor that caused the children of Israel to be punished time and again. All my close friends abhor me. Again, it's three friends that have come to talk to him. They abhor him. They loathe him. They're trying to get him to repent. And so the thing is he says, and they whom I've loved are turned against me. This were his closest intimate friends, the ones he felt he could go to for help and advice, who knew his innermost thoughts and plans, the best of friends. And now they've left him as well. They whom I've loved have turned against me. His wife had, his friends had. And again, can't we see Christ here? His friends, his family left, with the exception of his mother, with the exception of John. Think about how that's the way it is too with Jesus. And he says, they've all turned away. In verse 20, my hope clings to my flesh, skin, and to my flesh, or my bone. So again, I think his weight lost so much weight that you can see his bone. The muscles aren't there anymore. He seems to be so emaciated that his skin is attached to the bone. And he says, I'm escaped by the skin of my teeth. Maybe that's where we got the phrase, and I think it is where a lot of times we get the phrase, I've escaped by the skin of my teeth. This is the biblical reason why. You know, it's a proverbial expression that we all are familiar with. The disease has gone so far that he's at the point of death. I'm just barely still alive, is what he's saying. So then he just begs his friends to have pity on him. Have pity on me, you my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you persecute me as God does and are not satisfied with my flesh? His friends had forsaken him, and we've already talked about that, the close friends of verse 19. They have forsaken him, but maybe some other friends as well. He said, the hand of God has touched me. I know that God has done this. I'm appealing to you to at least show some sympathy and understanding. And all they're really saying is, you deserved it. You deserve it. You know, to unprejudiced people, pity would have been shown, but not them. So he says, why do you persecute me as God does? Again, this is Job complaining about the way God has treated him. And he's emphasized the idea that you've got my flesh, Lord. Why do you persecute me as God? Are you not satisfied with my flesh? Lord, what else? You've devoured my flesh. So, verse 23 and 24. Oh, that my words were written, oh, that they were inscribed in a book. They were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and lead forever. Well, I'll think about it. His words are inscribed in a book. His words are given to us, printed, engraved in a rock. And Job asked for these words to be written down, and I believe that they were. And I think the reason, again, as we've been talking about all through this book, is because God is holding Job up as an example of godliness and righteousness, even in the midst of suffering. Now, later again, he's going to correct Job on some misunderstandings that Job may have had, but he still holds him up. Here's my servant Job. Here's my guy that shows that you can serve God without expecting God to bless you and give you everything so that you will serve him. In other words, you're not serving God because of all the blessings he gives you, but because of your relationship with God. And he says, verse 25, oh, I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that God is still alive. I know that God hears what I says, you know. And I mean, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions about this passage here. You know, what's he saying? He's saying, I have knowledge. I know that God is still with me. He said, I know that my Redeemer lives. We sing a song that says that a lot of times. I know that my Redeemer lives and never cares for me. And of course, this word Goel is the Hebrew word. It suggests somebody who is the right of the kinsman to restore anything sinfully acquired. And so later, this Goel, excuse me, would be the blood avenger. So okay, I'm using an example here. If I killed you, then the blood avenger would be your brother who would seek me down and kill me under the Old Testament law to bring about the justice that I deserved. Okay. And we again reminded of the idea of the cities of refuge through the book of Joshua, but had been talked about in the book of Exodus. These cities of refuge set up to take care of accidental murders. So Job is is that of a vindicator. He took the cause of his friend and avenged them from their murder and their wrong. So he says, I know that my Redeemer lives and that he shall stand at last on the earth. I love this. You still see his total trust in God. He's still struggling. He's still hurting. He's still in pain, but he still trusts God. And he says, what? I know that my Redeemer lives and he shall stand on the earth. When one stands up, he's taking action. Job feels that God will one day stand and take action on his cause and justify him. And that's exactly what God does. And he says, what? And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God. So here he believes that he will one day see God face to face. He could be talking about the day after the resurrection. And again, what was Job's understanding of the resurrection? What was the Old Testament understanding of the resurrection? Did they understand it as we do? Did they believe in it as much as we do? Did they have entire chapters written about it, such as 1 Corinthians 15? No. I think it was one of those things that the idea of the resurrection and being able to live with God forever through eternity is something that was slowly developed. God had in the very beginning wanted to spend time with man, and God talked with man in the garden in the cool of the day. What God wants is a relationship with man, part of his creation that has chosen to follow him. That's what the resurrection is all about. But how much did they know? How much did Job know? So is it that he is saying that before I die, I want God to vindicate me? We know that's what's going to happen in the book. But notice he said, after my skin is destroyed, this, that in my flesh I shall see God. So there seems to be a definite hope, resurrection hope, hope of living eternally with God in these words. And he says, I shall see him for myself, and my eyes shall behold and not another. How my heart yearns within me. I love this. Job says, I want to see God. I want to see him. So if you should say, how should we persecute him since the root of the matter is found in me? Be afraid of the sword for yourself, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know that there is a judgment. The whole tenor of this passage brings out the idea of hope, the idea of the resurrection, the idea of something beyond this life. And so he says to those who have done wrong, I would be perished by the sword. I would be afraid of the sword if I have done something wrong. And again, we have him making the point, I haven't done anything wrong. So I shall see God again one day. All right. Good place to stop. We've covered about 4 or 5 chapters tonight. And again, we have to go at it that way because we don't have that much longer. So next week will be March the 22nd, 2022. Okay. That's going to be that day. And that's where we will pick up with chapter 20 next week. All righty. If you didn't get all of it, I did record it all. So I'm going to send it to you and you should be able to get it. It shouldn't be anything on my side. In other words, if you miss some points, you should be able to still pick up everything that I said. Okay.
Yeah.
I did send the test out. If you have any questions about that, this is an open Bible test, open book. We covered so much material. I don't want you, no. I want you to be able, whenever I give tests, to maybe recite some things that you've learned and studied from as we've studied that together. But I want you, more importantly, as you're writing that test out, to have something that you can refer to later whenever you want some help and encouragement to understand what a passage means. That's what I give the test for and why I give the test. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
everybody ought to make an A+ on this. Okay?
Yeah,
I make them that way.
I got you.
All right. So appreciate you. Josh, hang in there, brother. I'm still praying for you. And
I appreciate that.
you let me know. Okay. I've grown
Okay.
much, brother. And
You too.
I mean it. Whatever I can do to help you, let me know. Okay.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right. And with
I'll see you Tuesday.
all right, you too. And have a good week.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I don't know how to shut this thing off. Bye.